I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Rosemary, up from Storybite Studios. So I think we're going to get Rosemary up to the stage. Is Rosemary coming in? Rosemary's going to be talking about entrepreneurial intention. Says, trust me, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sure you do know what you're doing. But Rosemary, how are you? You're on mute at the moment, but how are you?
There we go. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm not bad, thank you. Not bad. Day 4, so a little bit tired, but still excited, especially when I'm looking at all the great talks we've got coming up, like yours, to open us here. So that definitely perks the mood up, and it's a nice day, so that's always a big bonus. Where are you based at the moment?
I'm based in Switzerland at the moment.
Oh, how's the weather and how are things where you are?
Actually, really good.
Oh,
really,
fantastic.
really good. Yeah, we've had fantastic weather the last couple of almost weeks already. We had snow in between, but then again, great weather. So that's been fantastic.
Fantastic. Well, glad it's nice there. Yeah, get your screen up. Whilst you just quickly set that up, I'm going to remind everyone once again, please use the Q&A function to throw your questions from Rosemary in. And I can see your screen. We can hear you great. So I'm going to drift into the background, but I'm here if you need me, and I'll be back at the end for some Q&A.
All right. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Good. Thanks everybody for joining this track. This is a new subject for me, but something that I get asked a lot because I'm in serious gaming, so a little bit of a different area of gaming. So in the gaming world, success is often defined by billions of dollars of revenues or tens of millions of downloads, right? But the reality is that most of the games on the market never really come close to that. And yet, even if you're a small studio, you can actually enjoy long-term success if you take the right approach to scale the business. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about. Setting up your business can be daunting, right? So I didn't build a large game studio, so I'm not here to tell you how to do that. But I've worked in giant tech companies. I've helped to build a few startups, from profits to nonprofits, also in the tech world, consulting, and now in gaming. And some of those are still alive today and able to pay people quite well, and some couldn't be resuscitated. So while I can't give you the roadmap to building a billion-dollar company, and don't worry, it's a virtual talk, so I won't see you leave, but I can talk about the worries that you may have as a small entrepreneur when you run into as you start to grow and scale your business. And I will touch upon which worries in my experience were productive and what just keeps you churning. Because boy, do I know about worrying. Because at 17, I started my own first business. And by age 20, I was spectacularly bankrupt. And so I took a safer route and I went into technology companies, larger companies. But then a plethora of mergers and failures, even in larger companies, showed me that it's not all fun and games there either. And so in this talk, I will bring up some examples from my experience and also some things that people more successful than I have told me over the years. But let's start with some of the most common things that people that build their business worry about themselves. That's my first worry to mention. Stop worrying about yourself. It sounds simple, right? Because if you don't believe in yourself, why should others? For everything that you don't know or don't know how to do, there is a mentor. So, you can find them. I think you need to always believe in yourself and keep going. You don't have to have the most talent in the world. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world. In fact, it's better if other people around you are smarter and you use them. If you persist, you will be successful. But if you don't believe in yourself, then, the next man's way of getting there might not really work for me. So I have to create my own ways. It only takes one person to inspire. So you have to believe in yourself so people can see your vision, your passion. The second thing is really know what success looks like for you, because success can be different, right? Here's where entrepreneurial intention starts. Setting the goal for what you're trying to do is really important. Not everybody needs to become a AAA game to be successful, although I do agree it would be awesome. But for the serious game Shadow's Edge, for example, that I produced, our goal was and still is to help young people who struggle build resilience so that they can work through the hard stuff that comes their way. And everything that we do drives that objective. So that objective have been the basis for all the decisions we make as we build the game, test the game. It can be seen in our story, our world, our characters. Everything in the game is built with intention, but not just the game, also the nonprofit organization around it, starting with, well, just that. The decision to be a nonprofit and have a free game without ads or in-game purchases. It's a tough decision and a different model of financing that still influences other parts of building a long-term sustainable business. Like, impact investment versus going a producer or distributor road, or if we don't want the players to pay, well, who will pay and where do we get that money from? It also has the intention to focus the game on helping young people dig deep and not distract from the issues. And so that in turn drove our decision not to start marketing yet or user acquisition before we conducted several research studies and a clinical trial. And we also worked with psychologists and our audience directly to ensure the game is evidence-based and we can show that it works. But again, that decision means you're slower to market. That decision means you have longer to worry, more financial troubles potentially. And so it's something that you really have to consider. What's your model? What do you want to do? That objective also drove our decision to focus in 2020 on retention, because we saw a lot more users pop up during COVID. And we saw from evidence that the longer players spend with the game, the better the psychological outcome. And so only this year in 2021 did we start reaching out to partners to push the game, are building a training program for health professionals in schools, and have started to figure out how user acquisition works to our advantage, considering that we are a free game and there's no in-app purchases or ads or anything. But even with these restrictions, we've seen our self-help game grow from 20,000 users to 50,000 to date. And whether you have 50,000 downloads or 50 million downloads, you can find ways to succeed in this highly competitive market. Because success is about understanding where you are right now and then taking the steps to build on that. And while it's of course important to learn from what your competitors are doing, don't let your competitive spirit get in the way of your own best interest. And don't worry too much about them, but really look at what makes you successful. Because what makes you successful in your own arena depends on how you pair your game, your titles, with market demand, your audience, and the way that you assemble and operate your company that you're building. Because a lot of times, really putting up a business nowadays in gaming is necessary, because if you are building a small game, you won't necessarily always be able to just hitch that to a very large company. And so for that, you need to focus on your goals and then see what helps you achieve those. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Starting out is not easy. It can be daunting. And not everybody can be Bill Gates or John Hanke. So you don't have to know everything. You can get help anywhere. And asking for help is not a sign of incompetence. It's something that I learned. It's actually a sign of confidence. A great way that I found to get help is to give help. I always ask people that are more successful than I how I can help them. And their answer many times is, well, I'm not really sure, but if I can help you in any way, let me know. Now, you don't want to play that card too often or ask for too many things, but it is a way to slowly build up your network. And when there is something that they could do that doesn't take away from their goals or ask them to do something that can make them feel uncomfortable, like, please pay my game now, then they will remember you, the person that offered their micro expertise, so to speak, with good intentions. And when you do ask for help, do so with intention. Be clear about what you want and think about how they can help you with it. And don't worry what they're thinking about you. They asked you, what can they help with? And so they want to know. I think the main thing I learned through these encounters is to stop worrying about what they think. Most people actually like helping, and it helps with your next point. Surround yourselves with smart people, because we all know that diversity is an issue in the gaming industry. And while the numbers are not adding up, and it is important that we bring it up, I think, the way to bring these numbers up is really to gather a diverse team, from gender to experience to localization to disciplines to age, etc. The more diverse you get, the more well-rounded your product will be. So it's not just about getting those numbers up. It is about the success of your company. And it also means that you'll have to foster a culture of empowerment and inclusion. I can tell you from experience, culture is the thing to worry about. I've worked in a few places where there was a culture of distrust And the only way forward for me was out. I'll go even further. Try to build diversity into your game, not just into your team. Even though we see more diverse STEM characters on TV screens, they don't always represent who we want to be in those roles in the real world. And we really don't see enough of them yet in the game world. So I'm looking forward to the next Pocket Gamer and look at Beyond Games and see what we can learn there. We're in a unique position to lead the way there. Did you know that because of Scully in the X-Files, they did a survey with thousands of women and found out that nearly 2/3 of women who are familiar with Dana Scully said that she increased their belief in the importance of STEM. And some of them even went on to get a career in that. And now that the gaming industry dwarfs the entertainment industry, which is a quote from the new TV series Mythic Quest, I think we should take our role in diversity more serious, because you can't be what you can't see. And so here's an example. The modern Pokemon game, Pokemon Sword and Shield, allows you to choose between several avatars of different skin tones and genders. The game characters also tend to be more diverse, and with gym leaders being different genders, ages, ethnicities, body types, etc. And my dad always used to joke that he had to install everything technical in our house. And my mom used to bite back that this is because all products were designed by and for men, and the manuals were also written by them. And we're not in the 60s anymore, but the point is still valid to think about. And so right there, that's the thing to worry about: your audience and who you're developing for. Games now are how people create and maintain connections. With serious games like Shadow's Edge, we saw a need for teens to express and work through mental health challenge in a way that's engaging. And I mentioned this because this game is a slightly different audience than your normal game audience. So we had to do a lot more to really get to know them. And it's not that easy if you start asking people, are you depressed? Are you suicidal? Or if you get these conversations like, oh, you have a chronic illness, great. Can you, help us with our game? Which obviously is not really the best thing to say to somebody who is sick. And so therefore, I just wanted to bring up really recruiting and audience here in this section. So as we started to recruit teams to help us in the game, we found that, for example, with COVID, we had to pivot and adapt and innovate so that we can stay in touch with our audience. Because your audience is something you should constantly worry about. And the other thing to get to your audience, of course, you need to be able to sell. Sales can have a very negative connotation. Studies show that when we ask people to envision a salesperson, 98% envision a male car salesman. Most adjectives associated with it are negative, and no one answered a woman. But that's not today's world of sales anymore, because today is a world of influencers and streamers and publishers and businesses. A study among 50,000 Americans in all kinds of job shows that no matter what the job, sales, persuasion, or influence, is actually 24 minutes of every hour of every day. Just imagine how much time that is. And so whether you ask people what you want, or whether you want them to see things your way, whether you want them to buy your game or invest in you or promote the game or work for you, it involves convincing and influencing people. And people still buy from people they like, from people they believe in. So the same counts for investments. People invest in people. And so you and your team are in the spotlight. Let all of them shine. It will help you worry less, because it's not all on you, and it will actually make your pitch stronger. Once you then have an audience, the next step is then really to focus on attention and retention. What you see here is a game, The Longing, which is a game that you have to play for 400 days, and it's objectively boring. And still you find yourself wandering around and going further. Keeping gamers' attention to your game is just as important as getting them there in the first place. So it's completely counterproductive to believe that a successful game simply comes from a brilliant idea and then it gets off the charts retention. What you are looking for initially is not so much a great idea for a game as a great idea for a game that could help you move, grow through phases, iterate, and change in the midst of all this technology and other disruptions. You don't earn loyalty in a day, you earn loyalty day by day, as Jeffrey Gitomer said. So retention is a matter of keeping them engaged and delighted. Top games are great at that. They have a 45% higher day 7 retention rate than industry average. This means they retain their community by understanding their differing preferences. I've gotten a bit bolder in the last years in reaching out to successful gaming executives and asking them questions. And here are a few tips that resonated with me over time. Build worlds that captivate and allow for sharing. Ask yourself if you deliver on user expectation, and follow the trends. Like, people now play for shorter increments. So use that in your game experience. Find new ways, small puzzles, things they can do quickly, and then jump out of the game and jump back in. Also find new forms of entertainment. Focus on that core game loop, really, to give them something that allows them to come back, something that allows them to see something fresh every day. So refresh content, look at multiplayer experiences and shared worlds, because people want to connect nowadays. And as always, and we've learned this well in the last 5 years of our game, keep watching your audience again and again and again, because you can learn a lot from them. Angry Birds pivoted from single play as they noticed that their players preferred competition, and they saw a way to monetize that. They also gave people that they saw were watching ads and not buying things more ads than players who were buying things. So for these things to work, the development and the user team has to work together so that you really can get that optimal game development loop and keep iterating. Another good thing is to deliver on expectations. 12 years ago, I joined a company that was playing SimCity in real life. Here in this picture, you see one of our planned developments that will actually be executed in 2022. What they did is they applied technology and gaming simulation and mechanics to real world environments. So taking urban planning that existed and that was going to do, and then they actually made that come to life in a game, had people move in, and you could do just what you did in SimCity, basically, with 68,000 different personalities. We had a great vision. We had fantastic people, and we were building great technology that was way ahead of the market. But after partners had invested in us and people had invested in us, we actually failed expectations. Not because we couldn't deliver, but because we weren't aligned in our attentions with them, and we let the partners down. So they pulled out. I never regretted joining the startup, even though it doesn't exist anymore today. I also see, of course, some of the projects that we started to create that still live. And so to this day, I regret that we weren't able to deliver on that attention, because delivering and timing should go hand in hand. As another example from the gaming world rather than the real world, Cyberpunk 2077 was a highly anticipated game in the past few years, but they rushed the release and there were tons of bugs and glitches, and Sony and Microsoft had to remove the game from online stores. So at that point, failure is more expensive than if you really start learning that quickly, which brings me to the next thing. Another thing to worry about is failing. However, instead of worrying about failure itself, try to embrace it. So fail fast and fail a lot, and do it really early, because the earlier, the better. If you have to differentiate between ruminating and problem solving, then it's still better to take a wrong decision and solve the problem the wrong way and fix it than to just not make a decision and maybe miss a moment, miss your audience, or just really increment costs. So one of the best things there is to just go back to what we said before and think of your audience and really adopt a player-first strategy. Involve them in your process, innovate, improve, iterate, continually commit to improving and adding new content. And again, follow the trends, because people may say they're not gamers, but 2.7 billion people play games. And so players are also looking for more than competition now. They're looking for connection. They're looking for feel-good games, especially now. And another thing that I've learned over time is to not worry about things you can't influence. That's one of the most difficult things to give up in my experience, to just stop worrying about things that you can't change. I would lie awake so many nights when I was in that startup with playing SimCity in real life. And I would think, what can I do to make this better? How can I serve those partners? Where can I go with this? How can I do these things? But in the end, it was all the decision of our CEO, and he just didn't want to do what the partners needed us to do. So there was no way to influence that. I know it's a cliche, but it still rings true. The simple fact is you can only influence so many things, amongst them being yourself. And while I don't really have the holy grail to turn off your brain, I can tell you this. Find out as fast as you can what you can and what you cannot influence. And then try to focus your intention on what you can work on. Because the more focus and attention you put on that, the less time you have to worry about the rest. Plus, a good rant in every once in a while to a friend that's totally not in your business helps, as does alcohol, food, sport, or whatever else gets you out of your own head. The industry continues to expand, and there are more gamers than there were a year ago, and the revenue is now growing at nearly 10%. There's great talent and great opportunities for small developers, and more than enough room for many to thrive. But it starts with understanding what success means to you, not the market at large, because you can't influence that. But it starts with you, thinking more deeply about how your own team, your own culture, your own product play a part in that market. So knowing your players is one of the most important things. Knowing your audience, being able to then find that place in that market and adapt your company and your strategy so that you can have long-term success while serving that audience. When starting out, I think one of the biggest worries is really knowing everything yourself. Try not to do that. Learn from people who are doing things right. Reach out for help, find a mentor, a network, find people and data that help you feel comfortable about the decisions you have to make. And then start with the people closest to you, your own team. A lot of times you have people around you in your close vicinity that can really help you. I'm constantly thinking that I need to do things faster, I need to do more, I need to measure up to my own expectations. And in fact, my colleague has implemented a rule that I have to pay $5 to her every time I bring it up. And so I tell myself, screw your fears and chase your dreams. It's the reason I completely changed course only 5 years ago and now focus on doing what I love. For me, success is doing what I love doing most of the time of every day, living well enough off that, and not have to worry. I will leave you with a quote from G.A. Shedd. A ship in a port is safe, but that's not what ships were built for. So if you're an entrepreneur, maybe you are made to put yourself out there. So thank you for the gift of your time today, and I'm happy to take questions, and I'll also be in the speakers lounge or in Discord.
Fantastic. I was going to say, I normally mention the Discord, but you've done it for me, so that's brilliant. We do, though, have some questions in, which I will dive straight to, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first one is, it's quite a good question, actually, and might seem obvious, but I think it's something that, is worth considering is, do you feel people are afraid to ask for help because they see it as a sign of weakness?
Absolutely. I think I was a victim of that myself as well. I always thinking that if you're leading a team, you're the one that people come to for advice and for help, right? But what I've learned over a time is it's not me. What I'm good at is getting people that are better than I am to buy into my idea and work with me, right? And so I am very fortunate. I've got somebody on my team who really knows research and clinical trials and is really great at figuring out, emotional side of things, which is totally not me. And I don't want to be that either, right? I don't want to know everything about everything. And so once you understand that you can't know everything about everything, but also you might not want to, you might want to focus. I am more interested in storytelling. I write screenplays and blogs and things like that. And so being out, like doing things like these, that's what I enjoy doing, teaching people at schools about gaming and trying to influence people to come into the gaming industry. Those kinds of things is what I like doing. And so therefore I'm just very fortunate that I can, I have financing, I found financing and they back me to then hire the people that I need to hire. And 99% of those are way better at their job than I would ever be.
Yeah, I think there's also a really good point of like not comparing what you're good at to something that you're maybe not as good at, in the sense of obviously everyone can have a go at the things that they're not as good at, but I know what my skills are, and that doesn't mean I can't do the other things. It just means I can't maybe expect the same level of like expertise in something that someone's saying like, can you help me with this? And I'm like, sure, I can help with this, but it's not going to, I shouldn't beat myself up for maybe not being as good at it as I am at something that I've been doing for 10, 20 years.
And don't underestimate. I mean, for one, it's more fun doing things that you actually like and learning about those. So if you want to learn new things, absolutely, of course, right? I've just recently learned how to create a TV pilot script. So that's something completely new and different. And I love it. It's great, right? And I had no clue about it. So I'm not afraid to try those new things. But also, don't underestimate how people really like helping people. I mean, if you've ever helped somebody else, you know how good that feels, right? So don't take that opportunity to feel good away from them is what I try to think.
Yeah, and I think you're right with what you've just said about focusing in on the things that you enjoy, because I just know that from my point of view, as in like when I moved from, it's a long time ago now, but when I moved from school to university and was then given not just the freedom to study in my own way, but also being allowed to study what I wanted to study, I saw that huge spike in grades and things like that. And I think a huge part of that is because I was just so engaged with the topic. And then also anyone who anyone who learns another language will know, I think at least in my opinion, that you have to be willing to fail, because it's the best way to learn and grow.
And also allow your team to fail, right? That's another thing. So with me, my whoever is in my team, if they do something wrong, they come to me and they say, look, I think I messed this up. And I go, great, let's look. Right? Let's look at what we can learn from that. Let's look what you did. Let's look how we can do it better. And maybe, sometimes failure helps. I remember here in Switzerland, there was this insulation thing that somebody figured out, to insulate houses. And it didn't work for that at all. But it's the best thing ever to get any spots out of textiles, out of, walls, out of anything. It made all walls completely white without having to paint them. And so, failure can also be a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. I am going to come back to the question above it that I've got here, but I'm going to just jump to the one that came in while we were talking, because it's on the same topic. But do you think people have the wrong concept of what success is? And they say, I feel most of the fear comes from the concept of failure, sort of, rather than the concept of success.
Yeah, and there's so many good things said about failure over the years. Like Edison said, I didn't fail with lamps. I just made 9,999 prototypes, right? Until I found the right one. And so you have to try and fail and learn from that. I mean, we do that when we're kids, right? We fall down and we get up again, and nobody says anything about it except, yay, you fell, let's go, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have that in business anymore. We stopped with that, I think. And success is something that is so individual, right? For a long time, I thought success was getting ahead in my career. And so I went from, being a software tester to developer to project management to managing, $50 million deals, $100 million deals for large companies. And I was really not happy. And now I have my own very small company, but I don't make huge deals, but I do so many fun things day in, day out. And every day I wake up, I'm like, yay, what do I do now? And that's just, for me, that's success, really being able to live the life that you want. And that for you might be, managing a huge company. And for somebody else, it might really just be making the money so that they can do something else that they love. It's just, success is, I think, in my view, success is when you are happy with where you're at and what you're doing, and you contribute something nice to the world.
Yeah, and I promise we'll move on to everyone watching from the concept of success in a minute, but I think this is a really important question. And so I'll ask the question and then I'll add something. Is the concept of success harder for women? Do we try hard to be perfect? And I think obviously we can apply that to a lot of other, minority groups around the world. Is there sometimes an added, onus, whether that's internally placed or placed on by society, that like you've got to be one better than the status quo?
I think so. Now, I can only speak as a woman, of course. I can't speak for all the other diversities and transgender or anything. Although I do, my TV pilot actually has a transgender in one of the leads, and I try very hard. So if anybody is transgender that's listening, I would really love to do an interview to make my character as believable as possible. But I think that men have that too. I think men are just better at just saying screw it and really just we always say do good things and then speak about it. And I think a lot of times men are better at speaking about it and then following up and doing it. And that's something I think that we women can learn. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you believe in yourself and you then follow up on that's lying, or that's daunting. I do see that in some industries specifically. I mean, I've had my tech career, right? And I've had positives and negatives. The negatives, for example, were that I had to explain like a star cable to a software developer just because he wanted to see how much tech I really knew, which they would never ask a guy, right? But on the other hand, I was able to sell a $3 million project to a company, and then after 5 months of negotiation, they're like, okay, Miss Lokhorst, one small change to the deal. I'm like, no, I can't change anything in price anymore. And they're like, no, could you spell our name correctly? And so, it's always a balance. They would let me get away with things that they never would have let their peers get away with. I think it's really finding your niche of where you can drive for that success, and just really believing in yourself, because that will give so much energy and so much passion, and then you will be able to get that success for yourself.
Yeah, fantastic. And I just sent you a message actually, because you mentioned your TV show. If you do need some help, I'd be more than happy to help.
I do. I'd love to.
I'm actually transgender, so if you want to reach out to me, that's absolutely fine.
I would love to.
Moving on though with questions, although it's fairly related actually, is someone has asked, diversity is a trend now, or I suppose some people see it as a trend. But obviously, we need to have it as permanent changes. How can companies work to have it as a common feature in their everyday life, instead of just, well, as they've written, instead of just being a fad or something transient?
It's getting tougher for these companies, to be honest, because now there's so much pressure on it. And I was very fortunate to talk to Nelson Mandela one time, and he told me something that was very crude, but very logical. And he said, one of the difficult things after the apartheid is getting Black people in the right positions in companies, because you can't just put them there because they'll fail, because they just haven't had the education. They're not as far as the others are, and then that will build resentment. And that kind of felt logical. So for me, I ran Women in Tech for Western Europe for Microsoft for a while. For me, I think it's building these experiences, really asking people, seeing what they want and what they feel, and really creating an environment that's fun for everybody. That's just inviting for everybody. And the only thing to do, I think, is just live by it, and create that environment that way. It's tough. It is tougher because sometimes there just aren't enough women on the market yet. Or, if you go, for example, take Latin American women in tech, or even in movies, right? It's like between 1% and 3% that are even there. And a lot of that starts in high schools and colleges. So I believe we're starting too late. So if you can do two things, I would say, as a woman, or as a minority in tech, reach out and to others, and be open when others reach out to you for help. We're getting back to this help, right? So help each other move on, because it can go both ways, right? And the other thing I think is support organizations that start younger, that start earlier. Really, go into the schools, help educate people about how much fun it is to work in gaming, and how many different jobs there are in gaming. It's not all about coding. You don't have to, be a stereotype. It's very different. And I think the media is helping. There's now more focus on diversity also on screen. I hope to contribute to that, but it is still media, and so they are still a little bit stereotyped, right? And so the other thing we can do is, as people, is consume that diverse content and make sure people know that we like it and that we want to see more of it.
I think that's a really, really good point, because obviously that's something, especially in games, that we've gone round and round about quite a lot, is, the idea that certain companies, we had the whole thing with box art, that it has to have the sort of dude bro with the gun on the front, or like the whole thing of like, no one will buy it if it has a female lead character. And thankfully, a lot of those things have been proven false as they've been challenged. But like you say, it requires that support from both the industry and the consumer to say, like, I want to see more of this kind of thing. And yeah, like you say, it's both making those it's both making those fast decisions in terms of, making sure you've got a diverse workforce, but like you say, maybe even more importantly is all the grassroots level and making sure that this is something that's long term. Yeah.
And it can be small things, right?
Yeah.
For example, every game I buy where there's something on the box that I don't like, then I go back and I put a post-it on it and say, where's your female character? And I send it back to the game company. Now, it probably will never arrive anywhere, but I just feel like I've done something.
Yeah, no, and I think there's a lot to that as well. I mean, I myself am the kind of person who just wants to, you can either look at it positively or negatively as well. And you can say, I don't want to support the things that don't stand by my values. But alternatively, you can also say like, well, I do really want to support the things that do stand by my values. And and I think that's totally right as well. I love seeing things where it's like, equal representation on box art, for example, or, characters. So definitely. I've kept you quite a long time, but I'm going to ask you one last question that we've got, if that's okay, because we've got the one.
I'll be in the speakers lounge as well.
Yeah, exactly, which is fantastic, because just to remind everyone, and we'll get Katie to throw a link in, we've got the Discord as well that I forgot to mention at the top, but please do dive into the Discord, because as Rosemary says, she'll be there to go through everything and answer more questions, and we've got loads more stuff going on in there, like the journalist bar and everything else. There's the link. But the last question we've got from our audience is, what if you asked for, we've actually had another one, but it's a easier one, but so for this one, what if you asked for help mentoring and the people you reached out to are not available or don't answer? How do you gather the energy to keep going? How do you find mentoring, and what strategy do you adopt to contact a potential mentor? It's quite a good question, really.
It's a great question. I was in a film networking event last night, and somebody said to me that Brad Pitt, for his first movie, before he got his first role, he went on 1,265 auditions. It's such a weird number that I remembered it. And so, I think number one, some people are busy, right? And some people might not be able to answer. They might not have time. But what you can do, for one, is reach out again and say, look, sorry, I bothered you, right? Would you have anybody else that you could recommend, for example? Right? That's a very quick one. They can answer that with one name. That's all. And you show that you're persistent. And I think from a motivational part of it, there's so many people out there, right? So you will find your mentor somewhere. Yes, it's daunting to keep going. But for example, in networking events, those kinds of things, usually people that are on panels or that network, they are actually interested in helping, because otherwise they wouldn't be speaking, right? So that's something to think about. And the other thing to think about is a lot of these like famous people, for example, they're not the ones to approach, because they don't answer their own stuff. They don't look at their own things, right? And so there you really need to find a way to get a referral, to find somebody that's connected to that somebody. And for that, things like LinkedIn or other parts are really, really good. And hardly anybody will say, well, if you ask, can I get a connection to this person? Here's what I want to do. And if it's something normal, not outrageous, hardly anybody will say no to that, at least. So then just try to do baby steps to get to the right person that you want. Or try to find alternatives that also have that skill. It doesn't always have to be, you don't always have to have a mentor, that is, I don't know, Sheryl Sandberg, right? It could be somebody that just really knows a different field well. And that's also okay.
Yeah, and I think, especially in games, I mean, I don't just mean Pocket Gamer Connects, but I mean any of these shows, if you're at a talk, and often they'll put their contact information up at the end of the talk or something, I think, or like we've got the Discord or stuff, like reach out to people. I think it's a really nice way to do it if you've got that. Yeah, and I think it's nice if you've got that personal connection, like, I watched your talk, I found what you were saying interesting, and things like that. It's a friendly industry. I've kept you long enough, but the last question is maybe a little thing. Maybe you can't share something, maybe you can share something. Is someone said, love the talk. Is there anything you can share about the upcoming TV show you alluded to?
Sure. Well, it's not upcoming yet. I finished a script, right? I'm now trying to sell it. Hence the network night with LA agents and managers to try and get it done. But sure, yeah. So it's an hour-long procedural drama. So the intent is to have it on one of these streaming networks like Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, and others. The lead character, there's two actually, but the main character is a hologram, an AI that is an African-American woman, and she is recruited, or should I say licensed, into a team of agents to help solve crimes in the gaming world. And of course, to do that, she can't do it alone, because even with all her AI and machine learning, she can't walk around, right? She needs devices, glasses, and whatnot. And so there's Isabel, who I talked about, my transgender character, who's the gamer. And she's the one that actually helps Kenya get around. She's her eyes, ears, and body, if you will, to solve these crimes. And the first crime is in an esports stadium where there's a bomb threat. That turns out to be something a little bit different than a bomb threat, if you will.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. That sounds really interesting. I'm going to tell the audience now, I promise this is the absolute last question we'll ask, but is someone's asked, just stepping back to the issue where you mentioned relating to Nelson Mandela and the apartheid. So someone said, relating to all that, how can we help to accelerate closing that experience gap? You know, how can we work to improve that maybe faster? Be a mentor. Yeah, I mean,
there is, everybody has skills. No matter what the skill, you have some skill, right? In my case, I love skills around storytelling. That's what I like helping people with, etc. Helping tell them their own stories, etc. I couldn't mentor around, I don't know, mental health or, life coaching. No chance. But everybody, no matter what job you're in, even if you work at McDonald's, you know something that you can do well. Right?
Yeah.
So help other people do that part well. And again, the more you network, we all want to be more connected, especially now, right? So this is a great way to connect, to help other people.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. I think that's really great advice. And then on the password, the TV show sounds brilliant. It's exactly the kind of thing I'd watch. So yeah, that's very exciting. Fingers crossed for you. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for staying for this extended Q&A. We just had so many questions coming in.
And thank you so much. It's really lovely to get that many questions. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your interest in this. I'm really, really grateful.
Yeah, big thank you to the audience. And I just thought, let's keep that conversation going, because it's such an important topic of conversation. And and I think especially within the Q&A and through the talk, some really amazing points were raised. So and things to think about. So thank you so much, Rosemary, for opening our industry visions and values track with such a great talk.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sophia. And
thank
the audience as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Rosemary. Yeah, I think you'll all agree that was absolutely fascinating. And thank you to everyone for all of the questions you asked. Some really, really important topics were raised. And, I think there's a lot of actionable stuff there for people who are both looking for mentorship and looking to grow, and people who are thinking, how do I give back a little more and help, raise other voices. So I think that's brilliant.